Hi everyone, Rabbi David Towel here with our continued study of Mishnayot Masechet Berachot. We are up to chapter 8, Perek Het, Mishnah 5, Mishnah He. This Mishnah continues the debates between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, this time talking about the Havdala ceremony. We'll take a step back for a moment and mention that when we make Havdala on Motzei Shabbat, there are always 4 Berachot that we say. The first being Borei Peri HaGefen, because we recite Havdala over a cup of wine, followed by Besamim, the Berachot on the incense, followed by the Berachot on the candle, Borei Me'oreh Ha'esh, Ner, and concluding with Havdala, Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. The reason why we make the Berachot on incense on Motzei Shabbat is because since Shabbat is leaving, our Neshama Yetera, our extra soul, is also leaving us. The Kedusha of Shabbat is departing. And so to make us feel better, to infuse the soul with a comfort after leaving Shabbat, we smell besamim. Ner, the beracha over the fire, is made on Motzei Shabbat because it was on Motzei Shabbat that man received the wisdom from Hashem to knock 2 rocks together and to create fire. So every Motzei Shabbat, we remember that miracle, that nes, and that wisdom that Hashem gave by making the beracha on fire. And we do this before having hana'ah, having any benefit from light or fire throughout the course of the week. Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel here argue about a very unique set of circumstances. A case in which a person had seudat shelishit at the end of Shabbat, and that seudah carried into the close of Shabbat, beyond the nightfall. When Shabbat was over, the person now wants to make Birkat HaMazon, but to also incorporate with the Birkat HaMazon the Havdala ceremony. Leave Tefillat Arbit now for a moment. Arbit could be prayed at a later time to end Shabbat, but technically Shabbat is over, the person can make Havdalah. Now, typically, Birkat HaMazon is made over a cup of wine. This is not something that halacha l'maaseh is mandatory, but the Mishnayot and the Gemarot talk about making Birkat HaMazon over a cup of wine. The Mishnah is discussing a debate between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel when the person has the obligation to make Birkat HaMazon over a cup of wine, but also wishes to make Havdalah over a cup of wine, and only has 1 cup of wine to use. In a situation where a person had a plethora of wine, they could make first Birkat HaMazon over the cup of wine, and then make Havdalah over another cup of wine and separate the 2 ceremonies. But because the person has only 1 cup, they wish to incorporate all of the Berachot together. And so the question becomes, what should the proper order of the Berachot be when you're performing Havdalah together with Birkat HaMazon over the same cup of wine? Interestingly, the Mishnah will not discuss the Beracha of Borei Pri HaGefen over the wine, presumably because the Beracha of Borei Pri HaGefen will be recited in connection with the Havdalah, the Beracha of Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. And much the way Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel disagreed with the order of Kiddushat Hayom and Borei Pri HaGefen in the very first Mishnah of our chapter, they would likely have the same argument regarding Borei Pri HaGefen and Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol in our case. According to Bet Shammai, they would make Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol and then Borei Pri HaGefen. According to Bet Hillel, Borei Pri HaGefen first and then Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. But the Mishnah does not discuss Borei Pri HaGefen. It discusses the other berachot of the Ner, the fire, the Besamim, the incense, and Birkat HaMazon. Let's read the Mishnah. Bet Shammai Omrim, Bet Shammai say, Ner umazon ubsamim vehavdalah. That the proper order should start with the candle, followed by Birkat HaMazon, with over a cup of wine, with the wine poured, followed by Besamim, the incense, followed by Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. And as we said, Borei Pri HaGefen will follow according to Bet Shammai. Ubet Hillel Omrim, Bet Hillel say, Ner ubesamim umazon vehavdalah. That first the candle, then the incense, then Birkat HaMazon, then Havdalah. So everybody agrees that the first beracha is the ner, is the candle. And the logic behind that is because a person cannot benefit from the candle to read the Birkat HaMazon or recite the berachot without first making the beracha on the candle. So the candle has to begin. And Havdalah is the last of the berachot according to everybody, because as Bartenura says, Apuke Yoma me'aharinane. We want to delay the exit of Shabbat as much as possible, so as not to show so as not to show that Shabbat is a burden upon us, that we wish to rid ourselves of the Shabbat. So the longer we can prolong the Shabbat, the better off we are. So candle is always first according to everybody. Havdala is always last according to everybody. The question becomes where to do Bisamim and Birkat HaMazon. According to Bet Shammai, you have to do Birkat HaMazon before the Bisamim, because since the person ate and they have an obligation of Birkat HaMazon, which was upon them prior to the obligation of Havdala in the making of Bisamim, therefore Birkat HaMazon should precede the Beracha of Bisamim. According to Bet Hillel, since the candle and the Bisamim are always connected to each other, they're always Berachot that are linked because of their association with Havdalah, then Ner and Bisamim should be placed together. And we don't have a problem with saying Ner and Bisamim first, because although they're connected to Motzei Shabbat, they don't actually end the Shabbat. And so it's not an issue of making those Berachot early and not waiting for Shabbat to end. So this is the order of the Berachot in a situation when only one cup of wine is usable. The Mishnah then records another mahloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel about the nusach, the language of the beracha upon fire. And this is a general mahloket anytime making Havdalah. Bet Shammai omrim shebara me'or ha'esh. Bet Shammai say that the language of the beracha is shebara, who created me'or, the light of the fire. Notice that bara is in the past tense because we are talking about a thing that was happening in the past. And me'or is singular, one light of the fire. Bet Hillel omrim, Bet Hillel disagree. They say bore me'ore ha'esh. Bore being in the infinite present, creates and created. Me'ore, the lights, the illuminations of the fire. So according to Bet Hillel, bore has a dual connotation. Bore can mean created in the past, much like all of our berachot, bore mine mizonot, bore peri ha'adama, but also has the connotation of creating in the present tense, that he constantly is creating. And because of all of the pisukim that we have in the Tanakh, like bore or yotzer or bore hoshech, so we find that the word bore or koneh in the present infinite, in the infant present, also connotes the l'she'avar. And me'ore in the plural, says Bet Hillel, because there are many colors that are present in fire. You find whites and reds and oranges and even some greens and yellows within the fire. And so we are praising Hashem for the multiplicity of lights that are within the fire. And we, of course, hold halacha lema'aseh, like Bet Hillel, that our beracha is bore me'ore ha'esh. We now move to Mishnah Vav, continuing on the theme of Havdalah, and specifically the candle and the Bisamim. The Mishnah gives us now important laws regarding what candle and what Bisamim are usable for Havdalah. Mishnah Vav. En mevarchim lo al haner velo al bisamim shel ovdei kochavim. One may not make a blessing at the end of Shabbat on the candle or on the incense of idolaters. Velo al haner velo al bisamim shel metim, and neither upon a candle or upon incense that is in connection with a deceased person. The logic behind not using a candle or bisamim of an idolater is because for the candle's perspective, he probably lit that fire on Shabbat and used that fire on Shabbat. And as Baratunura says, Ner mishum shelo shavat she'aved kochavim asam melacha le'oro. It's not a flame which rested on Shabbat because the idolater likely performed labor using the candle's light. And we are of the opinion, ur shelo shavat, any light or fire which did not rest, en mevarchim alav, we may not make the beracha of bore me'ore ha'esh upon it. So if a Jew violated the halacha and lit a candle on Shabbat, you cannot then use that same candle for the beracha on Motzei Shabbat, since a sin, a transgression, was performed using that candle. Hence, the candle of idolaters is unusable for Havdalah. When it comes to Bisamim, to incense, says Baratirura, Bisamim shel ovdei kochavim, Bisamim shehem b'msiba she'ovdei kochavim mesubim ba. We're talking about incense that was used at a party or festivities or a joyous occasion of idolaters and their meals, which was likely used for avodah zarah. And once it's used for avodah zarah, it is prohibited in deriving any benefit from it, certainly not making a beracha upon it. Baratirura cues us into the idea that the next line we're about to read in the Mishnah is not a separate halacha, but rather an explanation to why the besamim and ner of ovdei kochavim is unusable for Motzei Shabbat. Back to the Mishnah says, Velo al haner, velo al besamim shelifne avodah zara. We do not make the beracha on the candle or incense that was placed before avodah zara. This is not a law in and of itself, as I just mentioned, but rather an explanation to why the candle and incense of idolaters is unusable for the berachot of Havdala. As Bartenura says, "V'haditnan besefa," that which is said at the end of the Mishnah, "Velo ala ner, velo ala besamim shel avodat kochavim," that you cannot use the candle or incense of idolaters or idolatry. Matam ka'amar. It's giving us the reasoning, which the Mishnah does not typically do, but here it does. Matam, what's the reason in mevarchim al besamim shel ovdei kochavim that you're not allowed to bless on the incense of idolaters? Because the status quo of a festivity or joyous occasion of idolaters is the avodat kochavim, is that they're going to give praise and thanks to their idolatry. And we do not make a blessing upon besamim that was used for idolatry or for the service of idolatry. Why don't we use a candle or besamim of the deceased? Says Bartenura, because it's not really for its light or for its besamim. It's just to honor the deceased. And in the case of besamim, it's really to combat the bad smell of the rotting corpse. And we do not want to have disrespect for the corpse, that people should have a pungent odor when they're around it. So therefore they put some kind of fragrance to counteract the bad smell. And from here we learn that any type of fragrance which is simply being used to counter a foul odor we could theoretically have the hana'ah from the candle. So you have to be close enough to be able to get hana'ah, even though you don't actually have to receive the hana'ah. Bartenura says, no yehanu mamash, it doesn't have to be an actual hana'ah, but karov lo kolkach, you have to be close enough to it that he could have gotten hana'ah im yiritzeh if he wanted to. Our custom today is to go up to the candle and to hold our fingertips close to the candle to have enough light that we can discern between the white of our fingernails and the skin which is surrounding. This is how close we need to be in order to be within a distance that is suitable to receive hana'ah. And these are the laws that the Mishnah teaches us about the candle and the besamim of Havdala. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.